Hello and welcome to another Sunday live stream. YouTube doesn't support comment. Okay, hopefully I'm coming through now. My browser had to restart for whatever reason. So I've got a few things to cover today. First of all, welcome. We are going into Thanksgiving week in the US. And I am actually on vacation for the next week. So yay, vacation time. Got a couple things that I think are interesting today. Hopefully, we will be talking about. Well, of course, we'll start with the news. I've got an announcement, and then we've got two segments for Linux and one for Windows in between, and plenty of time at the end for Q&A. So let's go ahead and get into this. Let's see. Okay. It was announced this week in an article on Slashdot that links over to the Document Foundation, which in turn links to an article in German, that a German state is moving 25,000 computers from Windows 10 to Linux by the end of 2026. And in this process, they are moving from Microsoft Office to LibreOffice. They're dropping Zoom in favor of Jitsi on a server that they control and they've customized and set up, among other pieces of software. They, are moving to more of an open source first mentality, something that I have talked about in previous videos. So, and links to these articles I'll drop in the description after this live stream is over. Let's see. There is a GitHub annual survey that had the results released this week, which finds that remote workers are not returning to the office. And I can't say that I'm surprised. If it's coming from GitHub, then it's likely dealing with programmers and other IT-centric people that are more on the information and programming side of things, rather than the people that run the cables and actually do hands-on fixing the computers and whatnot. So this doesn't really surprise me that there's more people that are going to be continuing to work remotely. It makes sense. It's helpful for other reasons as well, environmental being one of the top of those reasons. If people aren't commuting, they aren't getting their cars out and polluting. So just something to think about. I'm not I'm not complaining about this trend. So another article on Slashdot, the Amiga CD32 and what could have been. So this links to a video on YouTube, not my video. This doesn't necessarily have the best researched conclusions to it. But for people that don't know, the Amiga CD32 was a video game console that Commodore launched in Europe towards the end of 1993. And the launch in the US was held up due to some copyright or trademark or other issues, some legal stuff that Commodore was trying to deal with. Well, in the process, the US branch of Commodore went belly up because they couldn't pay for the machines that had been built and were being stored in the Philippines. So the CD32 never got a true launch in the US. So any machines that are in the US were either imported from Canada to get an NTSC version, or they were PAL versions that were imported from Europe. And, you know, the machine was kind of interesting because at the end of 1993, the CD32 had actually outsold Sega by a good margin. So that's kind of the backstory. The video is actually covering an unreleased product called the CD64, which they make out like it was the successor to the CD32. Other sources, I did look into this a little bit. Other sources are saying that no, this particular piece of hardware was the add-on for the Amiga 1200, and it was mislabeled. Hard to tell. You know, I never worked for Commodore. I haven't been in contact directly with any of the engineers or other people that did work at Commodore at the time. So I can't say with 100% certainty which product this might have been, whether it was really a successor console or whether it was an addition to the Amiga 1200 computer to add the capabilities of the CD32 to the Amiga 1200, which theoretically would have been pretty easy, but, you know, Commodore never made things easy. Commodore management specifically. All right, so let's jump over to chat and say hello to a few people if they are, in fact, there and commenting. I don't see anybody in chat yet, so hopefully this is coming through and people are actually seeing and hearing me. Looks like there are 3 people watching, but for whatever reason, I'm not seeing any chat messages today. So let me try something different here. Let me see. Okay, so this is awkward. Good morning, David. Good morning, Carlos. Good morning, Hugo. So I cannot see the chat messages in my in StreamYard currently. I'm not sure why. Probably a crazy update issue. So I've got another browser open with the video playing, and I can see the chat that way. So I will keep flip flopping a little bit, and I will see what we can do with that. Curious to see. Apparently, this is saying that I'm in a private window, and I don't remember opening up a private window in Brave. Okay, I'm going to roll with it for today. We'll troubleshoot after this. Okay, so as mentioned, I'm on vacation for this week. Because, hey, I didn't have to burn as many vacation days to do it. So my plan is to have a couple of additional videos coming out this week. Probably one tomorrow and one on Wednesday if everything falls into place. The Wednesday one is a for sure because I have previously committed to doing that one, and I've got it partially outlined and just need to sit down and go through and record it. So on that note, let's move over to let's see, that's not what I want. Will it still share screen? Yes, it will. Turn that over here and share that. Okay, I'll put myself down in the corner. So, one of the big releases of this week was Proxmox 7.1. And there are a number of interesting pieces that go along with Proxmox 7.1. It is based on Debian 11.1 Bullseye with kernel version 5.13, LXC4, Ceph 16.2, QEMU 6.1, and OpenZFS 2.1. It has a new backup scheduler, or refined backup scheduler at least. Two-factor authentication has been improved. The templates for Fedora and Ubuntu have been updated, and templates for AlmaLinux and RockyLinux have been added. The other thing that is of interest is that when you go to add a new machine, and I'm not going to go all the way through the process, but if we start adding a new machine, virtual machine, and I'm just going to select something here. We'll just say, I don't know, we'll call this one. So when you get to disks, they have added this extra pane over here on the left side. So in previous versions, up through 7.0, you could only add one disk while you were creating the virtual machine, and then if you wanted to add additional disks, you had to go back and add those additional disks before you started the machine, the virtual machine. So with this, you can add additional machines, you can add additional VMs. Again, you can specify where you want the disk to be stored, and let's see. Let's put that on my VMs. And it allows you to change whether you want each disk to be IDE SATA, a VirtIO block device, or or SCSI. You've also got bandwidth settings that you can change. And of some importance, if you open up the advanced pane, and if you are actually using SSDs in the machine, turning on SSD emulation is going to unlock some additional speed. Your mileage may vary on some of these other options, doing read and write limits and burst settings for different things. You can go down the road and tweak some of this and, try to get just that little bit of extra performance out of your virtual machine. In most cases, it's not 100% necessary. If you, especially in the case where you're spinning up a server VM with no graphical interface, or knowing that you're going to run a web-based administration panel on it, such as Cockpit. There are things that you can do to streamline some of that. Some of this stuff, if you are doing strictly a console-based VM, you could specify none for the graphics card. In that case, you are likely going to be using some sort of a serial interface. So, you've got options for serial terminals here, which, some of that stuff is kind of interesting, especially if you're nostalgic in any way. Of course, you've got different SCSI controller options. Generally, VirtIO is going to be your best option. However, keep in mind that, if you are installing Windows, whether it's Windows 10, 11, or Windows Server of some variety, that it does not have drivers built in for VirtIO. And so you have to grab a driver disk, which I have outlined in other videos and demonstrated. But it's worth mentioning and worth reiterating. Other options, especially for Windows, it does give you the option of adding a TPM. You have to specify a storage device. Generally, you want to put it on the same storage as where you're going to have your disks stored. It does give you options. Obviously, again, with Windows 11, you need version 2.0 of the TPM. And, these are some welcome additions to Proxmox. It's a product that I enjoy. It's continuing to evolve, and I look forward to seeing what they will bring us in future versions. So I'm going to remove the share screen here so I can look at the chat, because this is acting weird this morning. Okay. Welcome, Tony. Hope you're doing well today. I've got a little craziness going on. I normally run StreamYard in my Brave browser, and for some reason it's not cooperating today. It's streaming, but it's not letting me view chat. So I'm going to keep switching back and forth with my Firefox window that I've got Proxmox and different things open in, and monitor chat that way. Okay. Yes. So something to remember is that David does have a live stream tonight. And maybe I can drop in a link, because I know viewers aren't allowed to do that. So see what we can do here momentarily, and give David a little promotion for that video, or that live stream rather. So this is happening tonight. And let's see if we can drop in the chat. Okay, so that should get everybody there, and hopefully that will push a few people that way. Chris, welcome. David said he loved serial terminals in days gone by. Okay. So let's see. For all the coverage of Proxmox, I now have a server in my Colo running Proxmox. So far, it is handling 2 domain controllers, password server, and web server VMs for the company I work for. Very nice, Chris. Very nice. So great. I'm glad to hear that Proxmox is working out well for you. And hopefully, as time goes by and you've used it longer and you've got more data, and you know, seen any issues that may or may not arise over time, you'll be willing to share some of those as we go forward, Chris. I'd be very interested in that. I don't have at my day job, I don't have even a real server room. So yeah, that's a whole other conversation. So all right, so let's move on to the next piece. So we've covered Proxmox VE. So what I want to do now, is I want to, there we go, that works. That. Open splash top. And so for this segment, I'm using the Windows 11 machine. As much as it's not something that I use on a daily basis, I have, through the different polls that I put up on the community tab, I have come to accept the fact that many of my viewers are still using Windows. And so I'm trying to accommodate them and doing a few more Windows videos. No, this is not going to turn into a Windows channel. I will never go completely Windows, but I will say that Windows 10 and 11 have made a lot of progress forward as far as making Windows usable for somebody that thinks in a more Unix style mindset. Okay, so the piece that I wanted to cover today on the Windows side is, by default, when you do an install of VirtualBox on Windows and you try to run VBox manage from the command line, you get an error. Well, there's a reason for that. And the reason is that the directory for VirtualBox is not in your path. So if you navigate to your system settings window, and I did that by just going to the start menu and typing in ENV, and it gives you the option to open it up. I'm sure there are other ways to get there. Come down to the bottom, click on environment variables, and you get this window here. You click on path and you say edit. And if you notice, VirtualBox is not, let me make sure that I'm sharing this. I'm not sharing this. Okay, let me back up. I feel bad about that. Okay, so you want to start with your system properties window, environment variables, go to path and click edit. And you'll notice here in this left side that VirtualBox is not listed. So you want to say new. And you need to add in C:\\/ by type an actual colon, program files, Oracle, VirtualBox, and click OK, and OK, and OK again. Now, if you had your terminal open prior to doing that, if you try to run VBox manage, you're still going to get the error. If you close that and reopen, VBox manage now behaves as it would if you were on Mac OS or Linux. And I'm going to be doing a dedicated video just on this procedure. It's going to be a short one. Maybe it'll be the one that comes out tomorrow. But the reason for doing this and being explicit about it is that I started doing videos on VBox Manage, and Windows users come back and say, it doesn't work. Well, that's because all the tutorials that are available tell you first to go to Program Files, Oracle, Virtualbox, and run the command from the directory that contains the command. Well, there's no reason for that when you can fix it with an addition to your path. Now, the way I did this, it adds it to the path for the user that I'm logged in as. If every user of the computer doesn't need to have access to this, then there's no sense in setting it up as a system-wide path setting. But for my machines, since I'm really the only user, I have just set it up for myself. And it will make it that much easier when I go to do additional VirtualBox tutorials, specifically VBox Manage tutorials in the future. And I do have a couple things planned specifically on that. Excuse me. Related to cloning disks from the command line, and in the case where you just copy a disk, changing the UUID, because VirtualBox expects each disk that's used by different VMs to have a unique UUID. Which I guess, if I remember the acronym correctly, that's probably a redundant statement, but I'm sure all my viewers will let me go on that one. Okay, so that's what I wanted to cover on Windows today. I just wanted to give kind of a preview of what's happening with that, and give people a little bit of an idea of how I'm going to approach some future videos, and go from there. So let's jump over to chat. David says the new versions of Windows go in the right direction, though I had my sincere doubts they would. They have one more big step to go. And that could be a number of things. In an ideal world, I would say release the source code, but the Kraken that is Microsoft will never do that. Okay, I am having some system errors at the moment. Give me just a moment. I'm gonna try to quit out of some applications and free some memory up. I have become aware that there are some applications out currently that have some memory leaks, and let's see. We don't need that. Okay. So, well, let me try one other thing here. Maybe I can free up. I'm a little bit of a tabaholic on my browser windows, so hoping if I dump some of these that it will free up some memory. But other than that, things are going well. All right, that should help a bit. So some of the other videos that I am at the moment contemplating doing deal with OpenSSH, and what spurred this idea was that I saw a video from another YouTube creator earlier in the week talking about the OpenSSH config file. Now, mind you, this was from a Linux-centric perspective. And I got to thinking about this. OpenSSH is on Mac OS, and it's also on Windows in multiple spots. First, it arrived in Windows Subsystem for Linux, and now you can actually launch SSH sessions right from the command prompt, whether you're in the traditional Microsoft command prompt or if you're in PowerShell. And since it is OpenSSH, the commands that you use are the same across Linux, Windows, and Mac OS, which is really handy to know and understand. And so I don't want to duplicate the exact video that this other creator made. However, I do want to highlight and demonstrate the same basic concepts on Windows, because if you are not able to install software on your machine, for instance, if you're in a work environment where everything's controlled with Active Directory, you may still have access to the command line and could SSH into other machines. Now, if you've got an administrator that really wants to turn that off, they can turn it off and they can block you from doing such. But, in many cases, it would be available. So the final sort of segment that I had for today, oh, that's interesting. Well, apparently somehow in the process of all this, I ended up crashing LibreOffice. So let me save a couple of documents and then we'll move on to the final segment, and we'll have way more time to discuss things from chat. So, yeah. One of the other things, and there go my notes on that. So, one of the other things that happened in the last week or so is that both AlmaLinux 8.5 and RockyLinux 8.5 were released. Let me make sure I'm sharing my screen. And if I can remember what I set passwords for on this machine, that one. Right. You try to be clever with passwords and then you don't remember what they are when you need to use them. Okay, so let's jump over to RockyLinux first. That one I know the login to because I just installed this before the live stream today. And yeah. So RockyLinux and AlmaLinux are both contenders for taking over from CentOS, which, you know, is a shell of its former self, I guess you could say, for all intents and purposes. But you get the same basic experience. So these are version 8.5. So based on Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8.5. And they were surprisingly quick with getting these released. So I did quick installs of both of these systems. I've not used them extensively, but it's refreshing to know that these two systems do exist, because I am not a fan of Oracle, other than VirtualBox, which I'm using less for my own purposes lately, other than for demonstration videos, which, you know, a lot of people still use VirtualBox. I have been mostly moving to Proxmox VE, as you can probably guess, the direction of my videos lately. I've been moving mostly to Proxmox VE for a lot of things. I have still a lot of respect for VirtualBox, but I know that it did not originate at Oracle. So I'm not a fan of the Oracle company, or Crazy Larry. But you know, there are other projects out there that have depended on CentOS the way it existed before Red Hat started doing all the changes, you know, after their acquisition by IBM. And so, you know, projects like Neth server, NETH server, and others. I believe there was a network attached storage system that was built on top of CentOS as well, and a few other things. It's nice to have alternatives. It's nice to know that everything seems to level itself out in the Linux world. There are bumps in the roads, and those bumps get fixed because people are scratching an itch. So, it'll be interesting to see in the coming months, I'm assuming, which of these new Linux distributions sort of gains the extra traction to step into the shoes of CentOS and become the basis for some of these other projects. I have not seen any big details coming yet on those other projects, which they're leaning towards, which they're evaluating, or if they're going to go in a different direction entirely. When this whole thing with CentOS started, there was some talk that some of these projects might, draw a line in the sand and base their future versions on Debian, which, Debian is a solid choice. There are a huge number of projects that are built on top of Debian, including Ubuntu and Linux Mint Debian Edition, for instance. So, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to see some of these projects rebase on Debian. But, I haven't seen any hard decisions that have been made yet. So, all right, let me take this off screen so I can look at chat again. Let's see. Okay, so there's nothing too new in chat. I guess I have kind of rushed through this because we're not quite an hour in, and I've covered everything I meant to cover. So maybe this will be the dawn of a new era where I start keeping these live streams to an hour or less, or I don't know. I'd like to go at least a full hour. That way I've got plenty of footage to chop from if I do more clips videos. So let me see. Let's see. When I was a programmer, memory leaks were a nightmare. I believe that. Andre, hello, joined a bit late. Thank you for coming. Welcome. Let's see. Ooh, had some reactions to the booster shot. Sorry to hear that, David. Hope things are going better now. Let's see. Well, happy Thanksgiving to you, Tony. Thanks for coming out today. Appreciate everybody that does come to this on Sundays. It's It's always interesting trying to pick a time for a live stream that some other streamer that you know or you have an admiration of isn't doing a live stream at the same time. So I've kind of stuck with the 11 a.m. on Sundays, 11 a.m. Eastern on Sundays. And so, other than not being a morning person and sometimes staying up too late on Saturday nights, generally this works out pretty well for me. So I guess at this point, we're at 11:53 Eastern. Does anybody have any questions, comments? Have you all seen my polls that I've been posting in the community tab? I guess this is as good a time as ever to bring that up. I've found those to be an interesting source of information. The most recent one came out yesterday. Excuse me. And I asked for those who are still Windows users, how many of you find yourselves comfortable with the Windows command line, either the traditional DOS-like syntax or PowerShell, and 77% said yes, they were comfortable. Which I found interesting. On 3 days ago, I released, that would have been Thursday. I asked a question about what your preferred Linux desktop environment was. And tied at 22% was GNOME and Cosmic from System 76, the Pop OS people. Coming in at 15% was Cinnamon from the Mint people. And the Plasma desktop got 11%. Now, of the 27 people that responded to this, 30% actually checked other as an option. And we had comments about Cinnamon, XFCE, and OpenBox, GNOME and Cinnamon, LXDE, and I know one that I've used that I think is interesting is LXQT or LXQt, depending on how you want to pronounce that. So yeah, I'm hoping that this endeavor to post more polls and more things in the community tab in general is going to have a net positive effect on getting to know the community a little bit more and just keeping the engagement up on the days that I'm not actually releasing videos. So I'm hoping to, this is going to be an interesting week because I'm hoping to release 2 or possibly 3 videos this week, which will be, a couple more than I normally do, at least one more than I normally do. We'll still be doing the live stream next Sunday, Sunday after Thanksgiving. So that'll be the 28th. And yeah, I've got a wall full of sticky notes. Um, I've been spending some time sitting in my office lately, just kind of brainstorming on um, different topics I can cover or different ways I can cover topics that I've previously touched on. And I've got a couple of experiments that I'm going to be trying, and hopefully they work out. I sometimes my experiments work, sometimes they crash and burn. But you know, uh, Thomas Edison had the same experience. So some of his experiments led to actual products, and others, um, got scrapped. Let's see. Let's see. Chris says I voted on them. Good, thank you. I'm heavily involved in PowerShell scripting for automation and deployment functions. Very nice. Very nice. Andre says I've tried multipass to spin a Minikube cluster. Thanks for making it known to me. You're very welcome. I've like I think I said in one of my other videos, or maybe the last live stream, I happened upon multipass just by chance on the day that the 1.0 version came out. And so I've kind of followed it since then. Not really close, but I have been following it. I had wanted to get a feel for the pace at which they were developing the product. And I had kind of wanted to wait until the 2.0 version was out, but I started covering a little bit more with the 1.8 version. I may make a dedicated video on that, but I may just keep that to the live streams and demonstrate a few more features until such time as the 2.0 version comes out, where it would, in my book, warrant a brand new video. So let's see. Also, multipass works like a charm, but you must have Windows Pro, not Home. Pro has Hyper-V. The Home version has Hyper-V only if you dig in the registry, which I did, but multipass refused to work. Okay, so Andre, that's a valid point if you're going to use Hyper-V. Now, there is an option that would work for Windows Home users to use VirtualBox instead of Hyper-V. I have not set that up. I don't know other details besides that option exists. So it would be worth investigating. I don't know as though I'll make a video on it because I've got multipass installed on my two lone Windows. Well, I guess I can't call them lone machines, but my two Windows machines already with Hyper-V. So, of course, my two machines are running Pro. So I guess I could do a VM that has a non-registered Windows 10 and go through that process if there's an interest. Let's see. Chris says, anxious to see what System 76 does with their desktop environment. Tired of hearing GNOME gripe about everything. Yes. So currently the Cosmic Desktop from System 76 is a fork of GNOME. However, they are starting the development of building, in part or in whole, a desktop environment with the Rust programming language. So it will be interesting to see how they continue to deviate from a standard GNOME type environment going forward. But I will say that, people have referred to System 76 as the Apple of the Linux world. And if you think about that for a moment, Apple controls the hardware and the software, and so they can control the integration between the two. And so if System 76 continues down that road, they could have the potential to build something that is very compelling once their goals reach fruition. There have been ambitious companies in the Linux space in the past, and some of those have crashed and burned in a spectacular fashion. I'm hoping that, since System 76 has been around for, I believe, a decade now or close to it, hopefully they have a grasp on the speed at which they can build these different projects, and they'll actually stick around for a while. So I'm hoping that, they can come out with something compelling and, make a real dent. But, anything is possible in the Linux space. But and I've got my Google Home complaining at me in the background. I'm not even talking to it. Let's see. PowerShell is awful, and string processing really weak there, but powerful in other areas. Let's see. I meant PowerShell is awful with string processing and formatting, but very powerful in so many other areas. That's fair. David says, 25 years ago, I did a lot of Unix C and DOS shell programming for a bank where he worked as a developer. Like anything else, when you do it a lot, you get used to it. Yes. For ease and speed, this is from Chris, I'm starting to mix projects with Python and PowerShell to get the project completed more quickly. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's see. Okay. David said, Windows systems sound like orphan children. Well, so I don't know if that's a response to one of my comments about my my Windows systems, but in less politically correct times, and forgive me if anybody has red hair, but in less politically correct times, I may have suggested that my Windows systems were like redheaded stepchildren. That's not really PC these days. I've got to try to find something a little more positive to say about them. But yeah, so my philosophy, I suppose, that I developed long ago, and I still, to a large extent, hold to this. Um, I understood that I was going to have to use and support Windows systems in work environments. And that led me to the decision that I don't really want to use Windows when I'm not at work. And so, I started using Linux in the 90s, the late 90s. About 2008, I started using Macs. Um, and now I'm in a position where I am able to support all three systems to a degree that I'm relatively happy with. Um, and in that amount of time, the last 20 odd years, I've become quite proficient in my Google foo. So if I don't know how to do something right off the top of my head, I know how to formulate my searches to turn up that information in a fairly um, rapid way, which, let's face it, we're all going to run into situations where we don't have the exact answer, or you might know how to do this on one system but not on the other. A prime example of this is you may know how to use apt on a Debian or Ubuntu system to install new software, but you might not know how to use yum or DNF on a Fedora or CentOS / Rocky / Elma system. But if you know where to look to find the information, you can get up to speed relatively quickly. Likewise, knowing that by default, when you install VirtualBox on Linux, it's automatically added to the path so that you don't have to navigate to another directory in order to run VBox manage, is helpful in knowing what road to go down for a Windows system and concluding that, oh, well, on Linux and Mac OS, if you install VirtualBox, it adds it to the path. It doesn't do that on Windows. And so the solution to the problem is adding it to the path. And then you have to find out, how do I add entries to the path on Windows? And, it's one of those things where, I'm of a generation where there was a lot of back and forth for tech classes that I've taken over the years. There's a lot of back and forth on whether to teach specific pieces of software or to teach concepts. And I always preferred being taught the concepts because, just to give an example, the classes that covered WordPerfect, Lotus 123, and DBase, looking at them now, are relatively worthless. they were very in depth on procedures in those specific programs. Now, I will say that in the case of WordPerfect and Lotus, they were foundational as well, because um, a lot of the basic ideas that they brought forth by using those programs, and granted, these were the DOS-based versions, the ideas are valid even now using Excel, using LibreOffice Calc, using Google Sheets, using whatever Apple's spreadsheet is called. Likewise, WordPerfect. I had both DOS and Windows version classes on WordPerfect. Bold, italic, underline, left, center, right, justification. It's all the same concept, and it's just learning, what keyboard commands trigger those features. And I guess by virtue of spending so much time at the keyboard in early classes, I am still a very big proponent of using keyboard shortcuts rather than grabbing a mouse. And actually, I've recently switched from a mouse to a trackball. I'm not sure this is a trackball I will stay with. This was a rather inexpensive one. I may move to a slightly more expensive model that has a few more bells and whistles and control, but I do like not having to slide the mouse around. So it's taken me a lot of years to get to this point, but I finally broke down and did it just because of limited space on my desktop. Okay, so I guess my tangent is over. Andre, WSL anybody? Yes. One of the things that makes Windows usable to me is having WSL available. And so I've got that installed on my 2 Windows boxes here, and I've got it installed on my primary machine I use at work. And it's very handy to have around. So, okay. And David says, I fully agree. Concepts is where things should be taught. Software will come and go. Exactly. You boiled down my rant to, a single sentence. Thank you. See what happens when I finish my outline material early? I just start to BS and go down the proverbial rabbit hole, and yeah, so yeah. Let's see. Andre says, if you've got the guts to try something else as well on WSL, more advanced stuff to understand how they reverse engineered it. So I'm not sure that they really reverse engineered it. Microsoft had previously a Windows subsystem for Unix. And Windows subsystem for Linux was really an extension of that idea. And I understand at a conceptual level what they did. It's basically a translation layer, or let me back up. In Windows Subsystem for Linux 1, the original version, it was a translation layer between Linux system calls and the Windows kernel. So it was basically like a traffic cop. It would intercept a Linux system call and it would translate it to the equivalent Windows system call. My understanding, and if somebody has a deeper understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but WSL2 actually has a full Linux kernel running. And so it's more like a virtual machine in a lot of ways, although it has a deeper integration with Windows. And that's probably where I better stop, because if I go any further, I'm going to be partially speculating and not necessarily basing it on the most current information. Okay, so yes, Andre, that was what I had thought. WSL2 has a full Linux kernel compiled by Microsoft with custom init. WSL-system. So let's see. Hopefully I don't crash my system in the process of doing this. But oops. Okay, so that takes you into a root level WSL prompt. So yeah, it's a 5.10 kernel compiled by Microsoft for WSL2. It's got symmetric multiprocessing enabled. And it is identifying as GNU Linux. So yeah, I had I don't know. Let's see. Yeah. So this would be something interesting to dig into a little bit. So While we've got this open, I'm going to open up another so PowerShell. And so I mentioned earlier that Windows has OpenSSH integrated into it. Let's see. Okay. So on a regular Linux system, the .ssh directory is where the configuration for OpenSSH lives for each user. We go into that directory. Of course, you've got IDRSA and IDRSA.pub, which is the public and private key. You've got known hosts, and then the config file. Config file is not there by default. And note that it needs to be named just config with no file extension, which is more difficult than it needs to be on Windows, but that's a whole other story. But the nice thing about this is that you can start putting in configuration for different hosts on your network, or on a remote network for that matter. And then, and I don't know as though this machine is still on. Machine's not currently turned on. So let's go back into this and let's say host PVE, host name, do that. And then we can just say SSH PVE, and it'll ask you for the password. But I don't have the key copied over to that machine yet. Now, if I were to do SSH copy ID -I IDRSA.pub root at okay, so something it doesn't like there. Let's try it this way. And it still doesn't like it. Did I get the command right? Doesn't like the SSH copy ID command. In any event, most of the features are there. Again, there might be some path issues. There might be some other issues that need to be taken care of before you get something equivalent to what you would see working with a Linux system. Okay, so let's see. You can also compile your own Linux kernel and make the system distro use that. That's interesting. I I've not bothered compiling a Linux kernel since probably 1998 or 1999. That's when everything started working well out of the box for me on my equipment. And, I'm glad to say that I've done it. I can't say that my experience is up to date for doing it again. You can also try the file system archive for let's say Fedora distro Docker container and import it as well, or import it in WSL. You can then get Fedora user space running against a true Linux kernel. Interesting. The system distro. So, yeah, so CBL Mariner, as far as I know, is a different project. So I was under the impression, or at least at the beginning, WSL used Ubuntu. Whether that has changed, I'm not entirely sure. This does, let's throw this back up again. This does show system D here. I didn't think that Mariner had system D in it, but I could be wrong on that. Never mind. I retract that. This specifically could be Mariner. My default WSL is, in fact, Ubuntu. I don't know. I'm having a brain fart right now. So yeah, I'll have to play with this system distro a little bit. So it would be interesting to find out a little bit more about this. I was not completely aware that this existed. It doesn't surprise me that it exists. Oh yeah, Mariner release. Okay. So CBL Mariner 1.0.2021 So yeah, I had done some made some attempts at installing Mariner on Proxmox some months back, and that didn't really go well. But that was a whole involved procedure where I had to compile the whole distribution, and it was a bunch of extra steps. Yep, got that, Andre. I had missed it before. Anyways, it is now 12:30 Eastern. I am going to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to thank you, everybody, for coming out and humoring me through some of these little glitches I've been experiencing today. I will be taking extra steps to make sure that this does not happen in future weeks. I think I've had this happen once before, and it was a mismatch between a new Brave browser version and something with StreamYard, and within the week that followed, it had straightened itself out. But we will see what we can do and try to avoid this in the future. So everybody take care of yourselves. If you're celebrating this week, for those of us in the US, stay safe. Take whatever precautions you feel comfortable taking. And that's all I'm going to say on the subject. But stay safe, and enjoy the time off that you get from working later this week. So I will be back. I've got at least 2 videos coming out this week and potentially more. I will be back next Sunday at 11 a.m. Same time, same place. And I will try to be a little bit more deliberate about getting postings on the community tab earlier than I did for this particular stream. So everybody take care, and I'll see you in the next week. And maybe I'll see some of you in David's live stream tonight, providing I don't fall asleep again. So I am going to set myself an alarm so that if I do find myself napping, since I am on vacation, that I will be awake for the live stream. So all right, everybody have a great week, and I will see you later.